ஸோ த நெக்ஸ்ட் ஸ்பீக்கர் ஹூ இஸ் கோயிங் டு இங்கே வந்திருக்கிறவர், நான் தமிழ் அப்படியே மாற்றிடுறேன், ஏன்னா நெக்ஸ்ட் வரக்கூடியவர் யார் அப்படின்னா, சான்றோன் என கேட்ட தாய் அப்படின்னு வள்ளுவருடைய வாக்கு மாதிரியே மூர்த்தி சிறுசாக இருந்தாலும் கீர்த்தி பெருசுங்கிற மாதிரி இருக்கிறதுலையே ரொம்ப யங் ஏஜோட யங்கான ஒரு பர்சன், படிச்சுட்டு இருக்கக்கூடிய பர்சன், அட் த சேம் டைம் எல்லாருக்கும் யோகா கற்றுக் கொடுக்குறார். அவர் ஒரு பிஎஸ் நியூரோ சயின்ஸ் படிச்சுட்டு இருக்கார் அரிசோனா ஸ்டேட் யூனிவர்சிட்டியில். பிஎஸ் டேட்டா சயின்ஸ் அண்ட் அப்ளிகேஷன் ஐஐடியில் படிச்சுட்டு இருக்கார். அட் த சேம் டைம் பிஏ யோக வேதாந்தம் வால்மீகி காலேஜ் ஆஃப் வேதிக் விஸ்டமில் படிச்சுட்டு இருக்கார். மேலே அவரை பற்றி சொல்லணுன்னா, பெரிய பெரிய ஜேர்னல்ஸில் அவருடைய ஆர்டிகல்ஸ் பப்ளிஷ் ஆகிருக்கு, நிறைய அவார்டெல்லாம் வாங்கியிருக்கார். அப்படி சதுர்ணாம் ஹி வயஸ்தானாம் தேன தேத்தம் அனுவிரதா அப்படின்னு ராமரோ காட்டின அதே பாதையில் அவருடைய ஜேர்னல்லாமும் அமைஞ்சிருக்கு. ஈக்விட்டி, இன்க்ளூஷன் அண்ட் ஸ்பிரிச்சுவாலிட்டி, ஸ்ப்ரிங்கர் நேச்சரில் அது பப்ளிஷ் ஆக போகிறது. மேலும் செல்ஃப்லெஸ் லீடர், டெய்லர் அண்ட் ஃப்ரான்சிஸ் டிஇஐ அப்படிங்கிற ஜேர்னலில் பப்ளிஷ் ஆகி, இதெல்லாம் ரொம்ப பெரிய பெரிய ஜேர்னல், அந்த ஜேர்னலில் பப்ளிஷ் ஆகி நான்சி ரெய்னா பெஸ்ட் ரிசர்ச் பேப்பர் அவார்டு வாங்கின ஒரு ஸ்பீக்கர். அடுத்து வந்து யோகா, அண்ணாவனுடைய நிறைய யோகா பேப்பர்ஸ் பப்ளிஷ் ஆகிருக்கு, அந்த யோகா பேப்பர்ஸை பற்றி பேச போகிறார். யார் அப்படின்னா ஆஷ்ருத் சூரியநாராயணன் ஜி. அவர் இப்போ வந்து அண்ணாவினுடைய யோகா பேப்பர்ஸை பற்றி பேசணும் அப்படின்னு கேட்டுக்கிறேன்.
I'm going to stand too. करामलकवद्येन भावार्थो दर्शितश्रुतेः श्रुत्यैव राघवप्रेम्णा तं श्रीरङ्गार्यमाश्रये. Sitaram. Rivers don't grow in a day. Most rivers don't, at least. Right? When you see a river, it starts out very slowly. Tailadharavat avichinna, we just heard right now, right? It's because rivers, they just keep on eroding the rocks around them. The rocks turn into dust, it creates a further path, right? You start somewhere small, there'll be a glacier. From there, a small piece of water just keeps on, a small flow of water starts. And every day, incessantly, that river starts eating up the rocks around it, right? Slowly but surely, before you know it, every day, it's not a one-day process. Like I said, rivers don't grow in a day. They take years. And when you see that river once more, it goes from where it started all the way to the ocean. Tailadharava davichinna, incessantly, continuously, without stopping. That is the river of insight. If you go to the Vedas, right? Saraswati Nadi, Choditri Sundratanam Chetanti Sumatinam Yagyam Dadhe Saraswati. Saraswati, the Mahanadi, that itself, Adhara, when you go to Dwanidipika, the underlying meaning is insight. That which impels you, Chodana Shakti, that which impels you towards insight. And it's that constant flow of insight that breaks through so many things. It keeps on going incessantly. Nairantariya, Satkara Sevitaha Dridabhumi, if you want to quote yoga, Dirghakala, forever and ever, constantly, it keeps on going, right? This insight probably describes Anna's life perfectly. Right? Ramayana Mahanadi, it's that one incessant focus on Ramayana, constantly, day after day after day, that creates a huge river of insights. And before you know it, rivers, they're one other thing too, the basis of civilizations. Rivers are the beginning of life. Right? We're all part of Webolam, Web of Life Makers. And that's what rivers are. They are the beginning of civilizations, the beginning of life. And in that way, through that river, Yajnam Dadhe, the Yajna of Dharma is born. And those insights carve the way for all of us who are sitting here today. If any of us are sitting here today, it's because of just one drop in that river. We're so attracted to it. We're so, we're so grasped by it, that we're sitting here today listening to this incessant flow constantly, day after day, year after year. I want to start with that continuousness, I guess, because that's probably the most important thing to me about Anna. Now, let's get back to those insights. To me, those insights are of three levels. You've got the core concepts, right? which is basically distilling everything. You've got, yoga, you've got Ramayana, you've got the Vedas, taking everything, pushing everything aside, coming to the core concept. In the case of yoga, manaf prashamana upayaha yogaha. Take everything aside, asana, pranayama, everything. What is it at the end? It's simply just calming the mind. Any method to calm the mind is yoga. Look at the Vedas. There's so many different vyakhyas, mantras, all sorts of things. What happens when you dilute it, when you distill it? Vedena vedo vigneyaha. At the end of the day, Veda mantras are to be known through the Veda mantras are to be known through the Veda mantras themselves. As for Ramayana, I don't need to ask any of you. Anybody who's attending weekly Ramayana classes knows what I mean. In this way, there is these underlying concepts that are distilled and given to us beautifully. How are they given? That's where we come to the second level, sadhana, right? Every single concept is then brought to the level of sadhana. How can I practice this satu dirghakala nairantarya every day for a long time, repeatedly, with passion, dridabhumihi, without leaving it? How can I practice it? What sadhana is appropriate? That is given. And then there's the third level. Take all of these sadhanas that we do. How can I put these together? How can I synthesize all these sadhanas into a schedule, into something I can practice? How do I take sadhanas and make it into a lifestyle? Right? Idea, sadhana, lifestyle. Today I want to talk with lifestyle because Anna's research papers, all of them are focused purely on this lifestyle, taking multiple sadhanas. See, it's very beautiful. Every sadhana has a value, right? In science, we talk about this thing called complexity, where we get seemingly random components, right? Something that has a certain property, something that has another certain property. And when you combine it, you get something that has a completely different property. To me, that's what the transformation from sadhana to lifestyle is. You've got so many different sadhanas, so many different properties, yoga anushtana, bhajana, Vedic chanting, so on and so forth. Combining those and turning into a schedule where the sum is much, much greater than the whole of its parts is what this third level is. And so that's where I want to start with. This Gurukula education system. Gurukula system is this essentially. Now, before I go on to the research papers, because it's a research paper, I have to start with the premise of all these three research papers. They're pretty simple, very easy to understand. Even in research, Anna's pretty easy to understand. So, simple. I take a bunch of kids in a modern education system, around the same age, around the same age range, you could say, to be more appropriate. And I take a bunch of kids, same age range, in the Gurukula education system. People who've studied there for, a year or 2 years. First, what I do is before they are admitted or at the beginning stage, I just run a bunch of cognitive tasks, checking for memory, sustained attention, planning and execution, so on and so forth. Simple stuff. Sometimes it's a game. Sometimes it's just cancel out the right letters or remember the right shapes. Right? Then I score them, I see what happens. After a year or 2 years, I come back to these same kids, match them, make sure there's no bias or anything. And then I take the same tests. What happens? What are the improvements? It's simply this. Now when I say this, it's pretty simple, right? Take a bunch of people, do these tests, move on. That's it. It's not that easy. Because I'll tell you this, science requires a lot of courage, right? You're basically taking your hypothesis, throwing it somewhere, and then telling, I'm basically saying this hypothesis is going to be right, and I'm going to do it in the most unbiased way possible. And science is always going to give you either 0 or 1. It's either significant or not significant. And believing that and just sort of surrendering yourself to the truth is what really science is. And that's where we have to start, that sort of courage. Because it takes a lot of courage to take these ideas, Gurukula education system, taking it and putting it against science itself is a courageous thing. And there's so many things you can do to obfuscate the results, right? There's a lot of things. You can take the statistical tests. I'm going to go into math here, sorry. Statistical tests. You can start doing p-hacking. It's a really cool name. But you can end up doing all sorts of things just to get the result you want. Just because you're so tempted to see what you have out there to be proved right. Right? All of that has been completely avoided in these three papers. You cannot find even a single doubt. I mean, the reason why these papers are so clear is because every single place where there can be a chance of error is just brought out, minimized, subjectively, objectively, even in the statistical tests. It's a little crazy even. I haven't seen like scientific papers like that from normal scientists itself. It's quite interesting and amazing. So now let's go on to the first paper here. Anna starts with memory. right? He just tests a bunch of people on memory. First, he starts with these Gurukula students, modern education students, tests them out. And he sees that there's not really a difference between their scores when you compare them in the beginning, right? Very clearly shows that he's taking an unbiased test set, so on and so forth. He waits for a year or 2 years and he does 2 tests. He does a test on verbal memory and spatial memory. Both of them are very different things. Both of them have very different results. And to me, this is another interesting point, because memory, a lot of people claim that memory can be improved through a bunch of ways. You've got people who say take stimulants, neurostimulants, I don't know, there's neurosupplements for memory all of a sudden now. You've got people who say do these activities to improve your memory. And it's marketed like that. The marketing is crazy too. I mean, we've got probably, at least billions of dollars just dedicated to saying this thing is going to improve your memory right here. And looking at that, you can also probably try to throw this aside as the same thing. Somebody is saying that the Gurukula education system also improves memory. Something's there, it's called the Gurukula education system, is doing this thing that improves memory. It's not that easy. The reason is because, like I said, science requires courage, right? And that's what Anna did. He just took that theory, he just took a hypothesis, he just presented. He had a null hypothesis, he had his actual hypothesis, he put it out there for a test, came back with the scores. And of course, what ended up happening is the scores were significantly better for both verbal and spatial memory. Now, this is very important because, like I said, a lot of things we advocate, improves memory. Like, for example, problem solving, right? You solve a bunch of tough math problems, people expect your verbal memory to be really good, right? In the same way, a lot of people expect that. That's not the case. Verbal memory was found to be much better for the kids who are doing Vedadhyana or yogasanas, so on and so forth. In the same way, spatial memory worked the same. People are able to recognize those things much better as well. In this way, verbal and spatial memory were slowly delineated. And of course, then also, it's not, of course, like I said, it's not just the result. There's also the reasoning of why. And to me, that is beautiful. See, one of the biggest obstacles, believe it or not, for any of these cognitive tasks or like anything, memory, recall, planning, the biggest obstacle is this thing called anxiety. Everybody's felt it at some point. When we're preparing for something big, when I prepare for this 15 minutes, you feel this thing called anxiety, right? What am I going to do? How am I going to face this uncertainty, right? The essence of yoga is to take that anxiety and just mitigate it and withdraw it and pull it back. And that combination of anxiety being pulled back, along with the combination of Vedam. See, Vedic chanting is not easy. It's not something that happens in a day, right? You've got Tiruvai and Sandai. Every day somebody sits down, recites the same thing 10 times, 15 times, 20 times, then they go do Tiruvai. If you ask the Padashala kids here or anybody who's done Tiruvai, they'll tell you how hard it is. You basically sit in a place, do nothing else except saying the same Panchadi, probably around 50 padas, give or take, for 100 times. And you just keep on doing that every day, daily, without change. That makes your mind much, much stronger when it comes to verbal and spatial memory. It's like a combination of reducing your, anxiety and bolstering your Vedic ability, bolstering your mental ability that leads to that. And again, at the core of it is that thing I talked about at the beginning, lifestyle, right? Lifestyle is at the core of this. And that's also very clearly underlined. Every one of these papers, one of the first things Anna talks about is, here's the modern education schedule. Here's the Gurukula education schedule. Take a look. And you'll see a world of difference between the two. I mean, like Anna himself very clearly puts it. You cannot say that these two people studied, like one person from modern education system and a Gurukula education system studied the same thing. Because the schedules are just so different. Like, there's not even probably, maybe there's one subject that's probably common between the two, and that's about it. And so, memory makes sense to us. And I think memory is a very good place to start also, because the next part we get into is sustained attention. See, attention is kind of a currency these days. Everything is fighting for our attention. You go outside, you see a bunch of ads. Today, the average attention span of an adult is 8.25 seconds. Yeah, it's not good. Most adults can spend 8.25 seconds more on something without having to deviate themselves. And that's because of a number of reasons. Mostly it's because of the fact that we've got so many distractions going on in our lives. Some that we create ourselves. Some that, we can't even avoid, because there's millions of people dedicating their every fiber of their being to provide those distractions for us, right? It becomes a person's career almost these days. So those distractions keep on mounting and mounting, and you just see this reduction in attention span. A year ago, I think 4 years ago, it was 12 seconds apparently. Not that much better, but 12 seconds. Came to 8. And if you go and see, and it's very interesting to me, because if you see a child, right? A child's attention span is much, much more, 5 to 7 minutes even, than an adult's. That's probably because of none of these influences. When your child comes out, right, he's not influenced by these distractions. But the gradual sort of like erosion, right, again and again, it's pounding on us, those distractions. Your attention span slowly decreases and you get to 8.25 seconds. And so, 8.25 seconds, that's about it. That's where we're at with attention. That's our value. That's the value of the attention we have today. See, what does education do for sustained attention? Right? Is education, everybody says pay attention in class. Nobody actually teaches you to pay attention. And that's the case scientifically too. So Anna did the same thing. He took people from the modern education system, measured their scores. Then he waited for a year, took their scores again. And there was no significant improvement when it came to sustained attention tasks. Our modern education system fails completely and utterly in making a person sit and watch something for more than 10 minutes. I don't know what to say, that's the truth. You can't do anything about it, and we're all victims of it today. Right? And it's very, very powerful. Today's success is determined by attention, I would say. And the more and more distractions that come tomorrow, right, that those distractions, mitigating those distractions is probably going to be what education itself is in the future, because we've got all the knowledge in our hands, right? Research is constantly going in every field, and you can get that research at any point of time. The question is, are you able to sit down and actually understand that research before you move on to the next hyperlink in that paper or in that Google Sheet or ChatGPT? So that's how, life is going for us. Now, what does the Gurukula education system do? And to me, this is probably, I hate to use this word, the unique selling point of Gurukula education system, the USP. So, the Gurukula education students, within a year, saw an amazing improvement in sustained attention. A significant improvement. And again, significance it sounds really, really dodgy when I say the word significance. It basically means that there's this thing called the p-value, and it's really, really small, smaller than 0.001, which basically means that it's almost entirely true, that this is significant. There's like a 99.999% chance that it's true, essentially, if I want to put it in really, really layman terms. But that significance is huge. And it's very clear to me, and after I read that, right, it's very clear to me why, I'm here and what it has done for me in my life, right? When I look at it objectively from a scientific perspective, and I look at my own life, right, the amount of attention that any of us have gained through this schedule, through this simple system, it's just a system, an education system. I think it speaks volumes for that p less than 0.000001. Sorry, I had an extra zero. So that's sort of the second paper, and to me, that became the sort of hallmark for me. That became like my interest in those papers too. Now let's move on to the third paper, and I think the third paper is probably the one that most people are worried about today, and it's closely tied to sustained attention, planning ability. If you haven't figured it out, most of us are really bad at planning too. Every day, because of the distractions we have, we end up thinking that we're going to plan something. We spend probably 10 times the amount of time we said we would. Then we start executing it, and we spend 100 times more, because every other second we're looking at some other thing or some other screen or some other app or some other program that basically, eats away at our attention. And so both planning and execution basically just elongate and sort of engulf the amount of time we have in a day. Before you know it, you spend 24 hours to plan for something that was supposed to take 15 minutes. I'm not talking about me. So, anyways, planning and execution. And that's how cognitive tasks also measure it. You take certain time to plan something, and you take certain time to execute it. Pretty simple. And so the same thing happened. It's a simple game. It's called the Tower of London. Basically, you've got a bunch of different colored objects on different color poles, and they're supposed to arrange them by taking one thing at a time and putting it on the other. I'm going to use a really lowly example. If you've ever seen those phone ads where they have like pour water from one cup to the other and then make it into the right arrangement, you've seen a lot. Many of you have probably seen that in YouTube ads or in like, Android ads. Something like that. Looking at the amount of moves it takes to come from one configuration to another. Simply put, right? You're given some time to plan about the amount of moves you're going to take, and then you're given amount of time to execute those moves. And that's what's simply measured. That's about it. So again, Gurukula education system students, modern education system students, they were given 4 stages, told to, take the time to plan and then execute. In the beginning, when they tested in the beginning, no difference. Like I said, they are just entered, there's no difference, your sample size is perfect, it's unbiased. You can make that out very clearly. In a year, there seemed to be around a 30 to 31% improvement in the Gurukula education systems, students to plan and execute overall. And it's very interesting. There is a few things here, right? First of all, the planning aspect of it. It seems that, modern education system, and for all its vices, it has one virtue, which is that you're forced to learn to plan somehow or the other. I think any of us who've studied in a normal school know that at some point you've got to pass your 10th and 12th exams, CBSE or whatever. And at that point you've got to start planning, or competitive exams, whatever it is. You've got to start planning, make your own career decisions and choices. It's forced upon you. It becomes a forced outcome because you can't survive. In the Gurukula education system, planning starts from day one. Every single thing you do is carefully thought out, deliberate, right? Every action is deliberate, almost like the schedule that's put in the Gurukula education system. Every action is thoughtful and deliberate and mindful. Mindfulness is really just that, just being deliberate with every second you have, right? And so planning itself in the modern education system is only able to take you so far. Probably 3 out of 4 stages. If you want to measure it in terms of the London Tower task. You've got 4 stages, 3 out of 4, 75%, there you go. The Gurukula education system is able to go the 100%, the whole way. Planning is something that Gurukula students are really, really good at, right? And when it comes to execution, it seems that they're good at it in every aspect. Execution is not easy. It requires an insane amount of focus to execute something the way you planned it, right? A lot of unexpected things can happen if your mind gets distracted for even a second. If you're even going away from your task for even a second, you move on to something else, your execution is lost. Like I said, if our attention span is 8.25 seconds, you can see how far it would take us to, lose our plan immediately and start doing something else entirely. So when it comes to execution, they showed in every sense a much more significantly better result than the modern education students in that sense. And this is another thing also that, Anna mentions in that point, which is why I talked about the 30% value, that it improved by 30%. It's not something that happens in a week. Like I said, rivers aren't made in a day, and in the same way, lifestyles aren't made in a day either. So, Anna took out other papers as well. He said, okay, if somebody practices this sort of schedule with yoga for a month, say they go for a retreat or a week, what is the improvement? There's like a 10% improvement. 10% seems substantial for a month or a week, but I think we all know that as you keep on doing work, it slowly sort of comes down and then tends towards zero, the amount of improvement you can do, right? It's very easy to get from in an exam 50 to say 80 or even 90, but going from 90 to 91 is probably just as much as effort, right? So 10% is there. You take somebody who goes for, maybe a month, there's around 15%. If you take these Gurukula students for a year, it's 30%, right? So that's what I'm saying. Rivers aren't made in a day. It's not this process. It's a process. It's a system. It comes through incessant work, incessant flow, incessant sweat from both the person who is implementing the system, the Acharya, the one who's showing you the right path to tread, and the person who's walking on that path. Through constantly practicing that system only does this planning and execution happen. And it's true for any of these tasks. Memory, attention, sustained attention, all of these things, they don't grow in a day. They grow through, constant work and constant planning. And that kind of gets me to the last point I want to make, which is, why is any of this really important? Let's be frank. I talked about 3 research papers to you. I don't even have the concrete paper copy for any of these research papers. I found them on Google Scholar. I typed Dr. R. Rangan, Space Yoga. I got 3 papers in the International Journal of Yoga, probably 3 PDFs. Not even longer than 1.5 pages. I've only got like 4.5 pages to talk for 15 minutes. And all of these are just bits and bytes somewhere in the ether of the computer space. Probably you can't even search for it properly in the millions of papers provided by Google Scholar, right? So what has any of these research papers really done? What is the impact? See, it's not that easy. Like I said, I'm going to repeat this again. Rivers aren't made in a day. See, that research paper is the last 11 years of my life. It's the last probably X amount of years you've been here under Anna. Because that research paper forms the whole lifestyle that any of us are practicing. To me, it's very interesting how some words on a paper have transformed into entire buildings with 50, 60, hundreds of students, just studying and dedicating their lives for it. You've got, something that's probably 1,500, 2,000 words each paper, give or take. I mean, even that's a lot actually. It's so short and concise. Those word limits is now the foundation for around 100 to 150 lives at least. That's like the minimum number here, right? 150 lives, years are being dedicated to these 1,500 plus words in a research paper. Because that's what it is. To me, that schedule is probably one of the biggest things. That schedule is tapas. That schedule is that one thing, that incessant flow that constantly runs through us. Any one of us, if you ask any one of the students here who studied in Shruti Ram or Sita Lakshmi, anybody who's even attended a Ramayana class, right? The biggest thing that all of us can probably say that makes it unique is what we do for that amount of slice of time in that 1 hour or on that one day. Right? Everything is curated specifically. You've got your 15 minutes of Ramakatha. You've got your 15 minutes of Kala Kaushala. You've got your 15 minutes of Parayana. You've got your 15 minutes of Shlokamala. If you take a really hard look at it, each of these is dedicated in such a way where all of these aspects of sadhana are somehow integrated into it. That constant dharana through parayana, through anusandana, that constant remembrance through shlokamala, the removal of thoughts through ramakatha, so on and so forth. Just in a 1 hour class, I can bring some of this. First of all, sustained attention. Sitting in a 1 hour class itself is a big deal, right? We should all pat ourselves on the back. I mean the teachers and also the students. So that all of these things, that 1 hour class is like that. Now if I said this for an hour, think about a day. Look at the Padashala kids, or any of the kids, Shruti Ram or Sita Lakshmi. I'll tell you this, and this is a personal thing. Anna personally looks at the schedule of every kid in Sita Lakshmi and Shruti Ram. It's personally created, curated, made, sculpted. I think Anna uses a very beautiful word there. It's not Anna's words, it's Ramadasa's words. Guru's job, or not a job, a guru's kartavya is to take a sculpture, it's to take a rock, right? What does a sculptor do? He takes a rock, he removes the impurities slowly, slowly, slowly. And before you know it, Rama is standing in front of you, right? And that's what this is. These schedules or this system or, the system behind it is this only. It's that removal, it's that erosion of slowly breaking away all these impurities, creating a civilization where we can live, creating a sort of hotbed, a platform for universal welfare, where millions of us can go around confidently with Rama in our hands, selflessly, because of this system. It's just a system. Isn't that amazing? It's just a system. And I think it's very similar to how our brains work too. You see, like I said, it's just a few words that creates lives. Our brain kind of works the same way. Our brain is, a physical mass of tissue, right? It's a physical mass of tissue. The coolest thing about the brain to me is that physical mass of tissue, through thoughts, through ideas, changes. It literally changes its own structure. The same way, we ourselves change through this system and this foundation. And that's what I want to leave you all with. Let's stay in this foundation. Let's continue this incessant flow. Like I said, rivers aren't made in a day. And before you know it, let's all head towards the Ramayana Mahanadi. Sita Ram.
ஒரே ஒரு விஷயம் சொல்ல விட்டு போயிடுத்து. எங்கள் வாத்தியார் பிரம்மஸ்ரீ கிருஷ்ணமூர்த்தி சாஸ்திரிகள் மாமா டாக்டரேட் பண்ண உடனே ரிசர்ச் பேப்பரை மகாபிரிவா பார்த்துட்டு, இப்பேற்பட்ட இந்த ரிசர்ச் பேப்பருக்கு உங்கள் ஆத்துக்காரிக்கு நீ வளையல் பண்ணி போடணும். ஏன்னா இது இல்லைன்னா என்ன, அந்த காலத்தில் கம்ப்யூட்டர் கிடையாது. என் மாமி கையால் எழுதினா, பிரேமா மாமி. இன்றைக்கும் பார்த்தா ஒரு எரர் இருக்காது அதில். அப்படி பார்த்துட்டு ஆச்சரியப்பட்டு போன மாதிரி, இவ்வளோ பேசுகிறோமே, என்னதான் ராமாயணமாக இருந்தாலும் வால்மீகிக்கு பிடிச்சது சீதாயாச்சரிதம் மகத். அதா மாதிரி என்னதான் இருந்தாலும் ஜனன்யாச்சரிதம் மகத்துன்னு சொல்லும்படியா பக்கத்தில் அந்த ஜனனி மன்னி சிவசக்தியாயுக்தோ எதி பவதி சக்த பிரபவித்தும்னு ஆச்சாரியால் சொன்ன மாதிரி பேர்பட்ட அந்த டீலிட் இதெல்லாம் கிடைக்கிறதுக்கு காரணம் எங்கள் நம்ம ஜனனி மன்னி. இதனால் இந்த விஷயம் சொல்லணும்னு அப்போ விட்டு போயிடுத்து. இந்த டீலிட் வாங்குறதுக்கு எக்ஸாக்ட் ஒரு மாதம் முன்னாடி இதே எஸ் வியாசா யூனிவர்சிட்டியில் அண்ணாமண்ணி உட்காத்தி வச்சு பார்வதி பரமேஸ்வராலா தம்பதி பூஜை நடந்தது. அப்போ அந்த டாக்டர் நாகேந்திரா சொன்னால், எல்லாராலையும் யூனிவர்சிட்டினால பல பேருக்கு மகத்துவம் உண்டு, ஒரு சிஷ்யனால யூனிவர்சிட்டிக்கு மகத்துவம் உண்டுன்னா அது டாக்டர் ரங்கண்ணான்னு சொன்னார். பேர்பட்ட அந்த பாக்கியம் கிடைச்சது. சீதாராம். நமஸ்காரம்.